Welcome everyone to the Salt Spring Island All Candidates Debate. It is always inspiring and amazing to see what positive turnout we get for events like this, especially in the middle of the afternoon. I'm Aletha Humphreys and I'm on the board of the Salt Spring Forum. I'd like to thank Lyle, the teachers and the students for hosting us this afternoon. And we gratefully acknowledge that we are in the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples. We only have an hour for the debate this afternoon, given the constraints for the school. But the candidates will be back at their tables afterwards, so if you don't get a chance to pose a question to them during this hour, and you do want to speak to them, please, that's going to be your opportunity. So we're going to start with opening remarks from each candidate, and then move on to 2 questions that have been prepared by the students. And then following those questions, we'll be opening up questions to the audience. Julian has a wireless mic, and he'll be getting his exercise, running to the mic around for the questions. So when it comes to the open questions, if you just raise your hand and give me a wave, I'll try to get to as many as possible. So I'd like to introduce our candidates. So we have Gary Holman from the NDP, Adam Olson of the Green Party, and Stephen Roberts from the Liberals. So we drew cards at the beginning to determine the order, and Stephen, you'll be starting us off, followed by Gary and then Adam.
Thank you very much, Aletha. Thank you everybody for being here. This is by far the largest gathering we've had for an all-candidates meeting during this campaign, and our roadshow has been on the road for a few weeks now, and this is, I think, our 11th or 12th occasion. So thank you so much for all being here. It's wonderful to be part of such an engaged community. My name is Stephen Roberts. I'm running for the BC Liberals, and I live here on Salt Spring Island. I grew up on Salt Spring. My mother was a nurse at the Lady Minto Hospital, and my father worked on the ferry out of Long Harbor. My grandfather was a park ranger in Mowat's Park back when they had campsites, and my older brothers and sisters traveled all the way through school through GISS and graduated from there. I'm a proud member of this community. I came back after working overseas about 6 years ago, and since then I've been very involved in working with our community to help make this a better place for all of us. I serve on the Hospital Foundation as chair. I also serve on Salt Spring Hospice Society as chair of that organization, and I chair the Advisory Planning Commission for the Islands Trust Salt Spring area. I'm also, of course, involved on the peninsula with the Mary Winspear Center. But here on the island, in the course of my role as a healthcare advocate for hospice and the hospital, I see some of the needs we have as a community. And I'm looking forward to helping us get some of those needs met as your provincial representative. We have an invaluable hospital, which is a key to the economic future of this island. We need to make sure we protect it, expand it, renew it, and perhaps rebuild it. And as your MLA, that'll be a key project for me, making sure our hospital remains the important facility it is to all of the people of this community. I'm looking forward to the debate ahead. Please pepper us with your questions, and thank you most of all for being here.
Well, hi everyone. I'm standing because I don't think everyone can see us here from the back. My name is Gary Holman. I'm reapplying for my job as your MLA. Very proud, very honored to have served as your MLA for the past 4 years. I lived on Salt Spring for 25 years, full disclosure. Now I'm living in Brentwood Bay. I married and am living with my wife in Brentwood Bay. I was former CRD director here for 2 terms. I started the Salt Spring Bus, which has been a huge success here, won a national award for the best startup in Canada. Believe me, when we started the bus, I wasn't as confident that it was going to be as well utilized as it is, but it has the highest ridership of any community of its size in British Columbia. I'm an economist by background. During the 90s, I worked on the Nisga'a Treaty, the fisheries component of the Nisga'a Treaty, first ever modern-day treaty signed by the NDP government in the 90s. Worked on a number of land use plans throughout British Columbia. The land use planning process initiated by Mike Harcourt, which doubled parkland in British Columbia. Come from the land trust movement, so I served on the Salt Spring Island Conservancy Board and the board of the Land Conservancy of British Columbia. Some of the things I've worked on here, you probably heard about the Grace Island issue, and I'm very proud and honored to have worked with Adam on that issue. We convinced the province to spend over $5 million. Unfortunately, I see Joe Ackerman sitting here, to protect Grace Island. It could have been protected for much less if they'd listened to locally elected officials and myself to stop the site alteration permit. I worked on recycling here, securing funding from the CRD to make sure that our recycling depot, not just here, but in the Southern Gulf Islands, stay open. And it's because of the provincial funding formula that the provincial minister has refused that would have actually resulted in the shutdown of our recycling depot.
Aids Gwecho Hela Siam Aids Jailacha. Sahanap Tenetsme. Just lay us in Ayanage. Lay it with awful lay it lungs. Hello, friends, relatives. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Sahanap. My English name is Adam Olson. I'm proud to be running for the BC Green Party. I'm from the Saanich territory, and I was born and raised and still live today in Oktawkwa Village. Today is the first of the candidate forums that my son has been attending, so you can give him a round of applause. He's sitting right there. And when he asked me to come today, I said, absolutely, you're welcome to join us on the ferry and come over. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Scorpions that are sitting in the back here. And congratulations to you for winning the Canadian Improv Championships. Give yourself a round of applause. I often tell the story of how the theater and the stage at Stelly Secondary, I was a stinger, you guys are stingers, but you're scorpions, how the theater and the stage saved my life in high school. At a time that was incredibly difficult for me, I found a place on the stage, and here I am again on the stage, and the comfort level that I have up here comes from my experience on the stage, so congratulations to you. This is my second time around as the BC Green candidate. We are offering an exciting and inspiring vision for British Columbia in the 21st century. The BC Greens are an important voice. We are good for democracy. In fact, I believe we're great for democracy, and we've seen the impact of just one MLA in the legislature, Andrew Weaver. We've also seen the impact of one single MP in the House of Commons. We've seen what one voice can do. Imagine what many more could do in the legislature. I am excited to tell you about the vision that we have in the answers to the questions today. Thank you. Haichka.
So we're going to move on to the questions from the students, but I forgot to mention to the candidates beforehand. Fraser Byer has very kindly agreed to be our timer, and he's in the front row. And thanks to Gail from the Driftwood, who's loaned us her wonderful, I guess it was a darkroom clock. So that's that buzz you're going to hear. So it's a bit of a challenge. We don't want to hear too many buzzes. Fraser's going to give you a wave when you're 30 seconds out if you're answering the full question. And if you do hear that buzz, that does mean time's up. Now, because we do have such a short period of time, and I know you've been campaigning for a while, and so you've got very sharp answers, we are limiting the answers to the questions to a minute, and there'll be an opportunity for 30 seconds rebuttals afterwards. And so to start us off with our questions, it's going to be Uta from the leadership class.
This question is addressing to all candidates. Do you have plans to put in place a more accessible and affordable post-secondary education?
Gary, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, thanks for the question. The BC NDP, if we form government, would eliminate all interest on student loans for post-secondary institutions, both new loans and existing loans. That will make a huge difference for thousands of students in British Columbia who, my understanding, is of the highest debt levels in Canada, actually. Tuition fees in British Columbia have tripled over the last 15 years. It's one of the legacies of this Liberal government. One of the other things we would do is institute a $1,000 grant for completion of studies. One important thing, which will have an indirect benefit, will be to enable post-secondary institutions to build affordable housing on their campuses. Right now, the provincial government will not allow them to finance, oddly enough, affordable housing for students on campuses. This will result in thousands of affordable rental units being built, and it will free up rental stock for other British Columbians.
So the BC Greens have put forward a very bold lifelong learning plan. I encourage you to go online and check it out at bcgreens.ca/platform. We are going to be investing $4.5 billion in lifelong learning, starting at birth and going through to retirement. We know the changing nature of work is going to require British Columbians to be as flexible and agile as we've ever had to be, and that's the reason why we are investing so much in education. We've put forward in our plan that we are going to take a look at the undergrad and graduate degrees to make sure that university degrees and programs are well suited for the modern time, for the 21st century. And as well, we are going to provide a $2,000 tax credit for the 5 years of school, which will help defray the cost of post-secondary education.
Thank you, Evan.
So since 2005, I believe it is, the tuition fees in British Columbian post-secondary institutions have been tied to inflation. In our budget 2017, the BC Liberals announced that they would be dropping the interest rate on student loans from what it is currently Prime Plus to Prime itself. Only 35% of British Columbian students actually take up loans for their student courses. We've also investing. We've created 11 new universities in British Columbia over the last 15 years in institutions like Camosun. We built a new trades center there, and we are building a health sciences center so that we can graduate more medical professionals. We're directing 25% of post-secondary education funding into skilled trade positions so that the universities and colleges that we have today produce students who can deliver on the jobs that are going to be needed in the future. We've introduced, of course, K-12 coding for students, which is going to set them up well for post-secondary education, and we've got another 1,000 positions in technology in advanced education as well.
Thank you, Stephen. On to our next question. It's from Acacia, again for the leadership class.
This question is also for all of the candidates. If elected, do you plan on addressing the great need for mental health services in the Gulf Islands? And if so, how would you go about doing that?
Adam, could you start us off, please?
I am. This is one of the least talked about but most important issues in this election. Actually, we talk about healthcare, we talk about knee and hip replacements, we talk about access to primary and acute and chronic care. We've done very, very little talk about mental health, and I know that it's an issue here in the Gulf Islands, but it's also an issue in every single community in Saanich North from the islands, as well as in the province. The BC Greens have committed to creating a ministry that responds to mental health and addictions. It's important that we are treating these issues in our society because we know that as people become less and less able to engage society, that of course the costs mount elsewhere. We need to deal with the fentanyl crisis in our province and across our country. I heard the buzzer, sorry.
So over the last 18 months on Salt Spring Island, we've actually seen Island Health take action on this very issue. 7 professionals, a net addition of 7 professionals have been hired to work in mental health on the island. A new office has been set up where those who need mental health services are able to access it without going to the hospital. We have to recognize, and I think people have come around to this, that people with mental health issues don't always want to be in an institutional sort of setting. They need to be taken somewhere or go to somewhere where they feel comfortable, where they don't feel pressured or stigmatized. Island Health is investing in that. We've got some difficulties in keeping those professionals here because of the housing difficulties on the island, but Island Health has noticed that, recognized that. Salt Spring is a welcoming and a tolerant place, so many people with mental health issues do find a great home here where they feel comfortable, but we do need to make sure that they have the help and services that they deserve, and we're already working on that, and I will continue to build on that program.
Thank you, Steve.
So the BC NDP will also create a ministry that's dedicated to the issue of mental health and addiction. This will serve to focus attention on the problem, and also there'll be associated funding that goes with that. In terms of the local situation here on Salt Spring, Stephen indicated a net addition of 7 new folks for mental health. That's not my understanding. My understanding is that Island Health has taken over that service from Community Services. So over the past number of years, my understanding is there have been some additions to mental health professions on Salt Spring. The price we paid for that was the closure of our day surgery room in Lady Minto. We actually lost our operating beds to the Peninsula Hospital. So I think this is one thing that an MLA, you should expect an MLA to be advocating for the community. It's something that I've done ever since I've lived on Salt Spring. That's something I've done for the past 4 years and will continue to do so.
Thank you. We'll move to open questions from the audience, please. And again, given the time constraints, if you could pose your questions in a very concise fashion. We'll start here. Thank you.
So, a recent Angus Reid poll found that 76% of British Columbians would agree that the current Liberal government is only interested in helping its political donors and big business. Well, this is a question for Gary. What would an NDP government do to end the rampant corruption of the Liberal years in power and restore government transparency, honesty, and accountability?
Well, thank you so much for the question. I am the critic for democratic reform, and since 2008, we've presented private members' legislation 6 times in the legislature that has been completely rejected and refused by the Liberal government. Legislation that would ban political donations from corporations and unions and set a limit on personal donations, all of which are in place federally, and in fact all of which are in place in most provinces of British Columbia. We would also ban the practice of elected officials getting stipends from political parties. Our Premier has received almost $300,000 from the Liberal Party since she became Premier. And she's the chief fundraiser for that political party. We would ban that practice altogether. We'd also ban government advertising. You can't tell the difference between a Liberal ad and a government ad nowadays. We would ban government advertising 4 months leading up to the election.
I think it's important to point out here that going to and doing it are different things. And in September of last year, following a discussion, the BC Green Party decided to walk the talk, not just talk the talk. And we banned corporate and union donations from our party, and we have seen an incredible growth in our party since then, because we took the principled position. We didn't say, we think we should do this and then continued cash for access or pay to play. We know that the corporate donors of the BC Liberals have been driving the agenda within the BC Liberal government. We know that. But also the corporate and union donors of the BC NDP. The BC NDP have left themselves very vulnerable to the agenda being driven by them as well. And in fact, they have some of those people running their campaign right now. And so the fact of the matter is that there's a big difference between saying you're going to do something and then showing the real leadership and doing it.
I sort of think that the Green Party refusal to take corporate and union donations is rather like the equivalent of my refusal to date supermodels. I'm simply not going to do it. The BC Liberals have put out a transparency policy, and it's in effect right now. 10 days after we receive a donation, it's on our website. You can look at it and decide for yourself, and the question mentioned transparency. You can look for yourself to see if you think we've been unduly influenced. Also, the Premier has said that we will appoint an independent committee to look at financing reform. I will hold her to that. I will hold our party to it. It's about time British Columbia got in step with the rest of the country and had some form of restrictions. But it's not my party or Gary's party or Adam's party that should decide that. It's an independent commission with the voters' interests at heart that should decide that. And an independent committee is critically important to that process.
Thank you, Stephen. Next question, please.
Thank you. This is a question for Adam Olson. When you were the interim leader of the Green Party and spent your time in the legislature, can you tell us what that was like, what changed the NDP and the Liberals govern our province, and how do you think you would do it different? And do you think we were well served by that, the two-party process?
Thank you for that. No, I don't believe that we have been well served by the two-party system in our province. I think that we need to have democracy works better with the diversity of voices. We've seen a considerable attempt to keep the two-party voice, the two voices in the legislature, to maintain that establishment, the status quo. The BC Greens have challenged that. We've seen in the legislature, as we've seen in the House of Commons, what a Green voice can do in order to change the tone of the discussion. We've seen the BC Greens change the tone of the discussion on the donations, as an example. To say an independent commission needs to do it, or we'll do it after the election. What happens when a party says we're going to stop doing it? I've never been freer once we decided to stop taking corporate and union donations. I don't feel like my hands are tied behind my back. We've never raised more money in Saanich North and the Islands provincially as we've ever done. So
Stephen.
So have we been served well by the two-party system in British Columbia? We currently have the lowest middle-class income taxes in the country. We have the lowest unemployment rate. We have the best job creation rate in the country. We have a AAA credit rating, the only one in the country, which allows us to borrow for infrastructure at a lower rate than anywhere else in the country. Under the NDP, we had some good policies too. They brought in the agricultural land reserve. I'd say the Liberals and the New Democrats between them have had some good suggestions for British Columbia. And I'm happy to say that those voices are heard by British Columbians, and British Columbians are able to choose and make their choices on that basis.
Thank you, Stephen.
Well, we believe actually we need to change the channel in politics in British Columbia, but we are not going to tie both hands behind our back on the eve of an election fighting the most moneyed political party in Canada. So we, like I said, we've presented private members' legislation 6 times since 2008. We're not about to give that up just on the eve of an election. I'm also very proud of, and I'm, as I said before, the critic for democratic reform. We are putting electoral reform back to voters in British Columbia with a 50% plus 1 approval threshold. This will give British Columbia the best chance it's ever had in its modern history to implement a form of proportional representation, which will ensure that every vote counts and will create a level playing field for smaller parties like the Greens. And there's only one way that's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen, and that's if we elect a BC NDP government in British Columbia.
The question was initially addressed to you? Yeah. I think if you would anything additional to that, you can maybe fold that into your closing remarks, please. Thank you. Julian?
Hi. Hi. Hello, you hear me? My name is Manale. I want to bring us home. I want to bring it to the place where we can't keep living the way we have on this planet. We can't keep wanting the 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom house, mansions, lots of property, 2-car garages, etc. We have here people on this island who want to live in a very eco-home, sustainable way. We have people who have tried building and have left the island because of the way all of our laws and building codes are all designed for in the 50s and 60s. Many, many places in the world are going to incredible sustainability. We are meeting here to have some kind of action so we can build eco-homes on shared property. How can you help us with this?
Stephen, do you want to start off on this one, please?
Thanks for the question, Mina-Lee. You're quite right. Consumption is sort of an enemy of the planet, but we're going to have increasing numbers of people who do need homes. What's the best way to provide those? There should be incentive through things like solar panels. We've incentivized people in the past to get heat pumps that use electricity and use the air outside to generate power. We've incentivized people to put in double glazed windows. We've incentivized people to buy electric cars. The BC Liberals currently give you up to $11,000 to buy an electric vehicle in this province. We've invested in charging stations as well. People still need to get around. In yesterday's Driftwood, Dion Hackett has put forward a very interesting proposal that's taking place south of the border, where you're able to get a deferral on your taxes for home investments that help retrofit your house for the environment. So your solar panels could be borrowed against the value of your house, much like when you're a senior, you defer payment of your property taxes and take it from it when the house is sold or when the person dies. Those kinds of programs would really help us to build better housing that's environmentally sensitive.
Thank you, Stephen. Gary, I'd like to respond. Just a reminder that the responses to the initial question are 30 seconds only, please. No, your answers to the questions, we're allowing a minute, but any responses from additional candidates, 30 seconds, please.
Question was addressed to all 3 candidates.
It was, yes.
Oh, well, they should all get the same amount of time.
Consensus? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Well, at Climate Action, the last 5 years, our emissions in British Columbia have increased each and every year. The BC NDP will be implementing a very aggressive climate action plan that involves increasing the carbon tax to $50 per ton. We will be generating new revenue with that carbon tax. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives estimates about $240 million a year. So over a term, almost $1 billion we will be reinvesting in things like public transit. While the transit system here, because it's standalone, that's the way I set it up. Transit service in the CRD has been frozen for 7 years. Those are the kinds of investments we need to make, as well as the energy conservation retrofits. The best bang you can get for your buck today in terms of energy investments is to reduce your energy consumption, and that's what our plan will do. And it's being commended by organizations like the Pembina Institute. Another important aspect of it is there's a rebate aspect to ensure that low to middle income families are not damaged by a regressive tax.
So to the point, Mina-Lee, with respect to how we're housed and how we develop our communities, I was a former councillor in the district of Central Saanich, and there's a lot of very restrictive bylaws to how many houses can go on a piece of property, where they need to be on that piece of property, and how we grow. Look, in our society right now, we've got a lot of empty houses. We have an awful lot of empty rooms. I live on a piece of property with my sister, who lives in one house, my niece, who lives in another house. We are only in that situation because we live on Sartlip and because they've allowed that. But I can tell you the advantages of living in that communal situation. Silas gets to live with his cousins. 4 adults get to raise 5 kids. We get to share the responsibility. We get to look after each other. And I can tell you there's some tremendous advantages to it, Mina, and I think what you're suggesting is we need to start to open our minds to other ways of living and other ways of sharing the space in our communities.
class size and composition. Many school districts are having difficulty recruiting and retaining teachers. Should the province, my question is, should the province help school districts with recruitment and retention of teachers? If yes, what specific measures would be taken?
Well, just to recount how we got here, for the past 16 years, the Liberal government, Christy Clark, first as Education Minister, then as Premier, has been using your taxpayer dollars to strip the the constitutional bargaining rights of teachers from contracts, which not only affects them directly, but has also left a generation of kids being underserviced, particularly those with special needs, or particularly gifted students. So you're well aware of the problem. Because of the court-ordered solution, we now have class size requirements that are going to have to be fairly quickly lived up to, and that's creating the problem. To be honest, I don't have necessarily a solution for that in the short term. I believe the provincial government, particularly a provincial government that's been stripping class size and composition from contracts for the past 16 years, should be obligated to help schools recruit teachers.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and there are a ton of other consequences to this as well, in terms of balancing the operating budgets of the school districts. School District 63, for an example, has a whole pile of support staff that are now going to be laid off in order to backfill with teachers. So there's a whole shuffle that's going on now because frankly, of the irresponsible approach of the BC Liberal government to education. They've been at war with education. We know that, and that needs to change. So we need to train more teachers. And if you take a look at the BC Green Party plan, what you'll see is we put forward a bold and courageous plan for investing in education, a lifelong education plan. It's the best education plan of any of the three parties that we've put forward, because we know the changing nature of work and the rapid changes in the 21st century are going to require agility and flexibility, and that's what the BC Greens are investing in, our future.
First of all, I'd like to say that I'm a product of our public education system, and I'm a product of our public education right here on Salt Spring Island. Irene Wright was my French teacher. Her husband Tom was my grade 5 teacher. I even did ballet with Ms. Wright when I was a child on Salt Spring. We have to invest in our public education system. Governments of all stripes, NDP and Liberal, have fought with teachers. Under the NDP, there were 3 strikes of legislated back-to-work issues. With the BC Liberals, we've had a fight as well. But we have a 6-year agreement with teachers now, and we're 1 year into that. We have to stop and put this behind us, focus on the teachers, and yes, help school boards to recruit more teachers. 3,000 are going to be added with the new program after the Supreme Court's decision. The teachers agreement for 6 years contemplated that there might be a loss and looked at partnering with teachers and with the teachers union to make sure that our students are served well. I'll be there to make sure that we carry that out. Thank you.
Well, look, let's be clear. The situation that we're in now, the court-ordered solution to class size and composition, was not created by the NDP, and it certainly wasn't created by the Greens. There's one party, there's one premier in this province who's responsible for this situation. Let's be clear about that. The NDP had bugger all to do with it. Now, in terms of our so-called pandering to unions, yeah, we've had disagreements with teachers, and we try as government to act in the public interest. But let's be clear about who's responsible for this current situation. It's the Premier of British Columbia.
I don't have a lot to add to that. Thank you, Gary. I just wanted to be clear that after that answer, that everybody in this room is clear that the BC Liberals have no credibility on public education. No credibility on public education.
I would would also add that we've got bright students in British Columbia and terrific teachers. That's why we perform at #1 in the world for reading, #5 for science, and #6, I believe it is, for math. We've got terrific teachers, terrific students, and the education system is performing. We're putting ever more resources into it, another $740 million in the next year.
Thank you. Julia, next question, please.
Thank you. This is to all candidates. There's a litany of factors leading to the complete degradation of the BC environment. I'm just going to scan very quickly. And I'd like to know what each of you intend to do about the following. Well, there's clear cutting, that's been extant for a long time. The export of raw logs, that's a complete crime. The Liberal decision to allow tanker traffic to increase by over 7 times with the inevitable spills to follow. There's the infamous, ridiculous smart meter program, very poorly named program, which needs replacement every 3 to 7 years, a huge expense to customers. They start fires, they blow up your equipment, they increase hydro bills, they end privacy. I do have a question, but I first have to introduce the question. Thank you. They remove privacy at home due to data mining. And there's massive new harmful radio frequency radiation pollution that increases directly from their functioning. In addition, the BC Liberals have predicated their entire...
I do need you to move on to your question.
The entire survival of BC on LNG, which is fracking, which causes earthquakes, storms, massive pollution. The methane doesn't immediately go up the pipe. The methane goes for miles, horizontally, pops up in your barn, blows up your house, ruins your crops. Your crops cannot grow. This is the BC Liberal program. Yeah, who do you too, sir?
Excuse me, sir, I do need your question. Moving on.
Basically, they're rendering wide areas of our country and the whole continent unlivable. This is going on worldwide. We must stop fracking. Hydraulic fracturing is a crime.
Just please keep your questions short, because we don't have much time.
So there were a number of points there and a lot of them went to our issues of energy and things. So can we move on to, and again, please, there will be an opportunity to speak to the candidates afterwards if you want to enter into a more fuller discussion. But if you could have a concise question, please.
Yes. Salt Spring is a growing community. The population is growing here, and the roadways are under ill repair. They're dangerous. We have no sidewalks. We have no cycle paths, and this can't go on here because every year the demand becomes greater, and the likelihood of it getting done becomes less. So I would like to put it to the candidates here what they have planned for fixing Salt Springs roadways.
So the roadways and transportation? Can we start off with Adam?
That's a good question. Because of course we know that there, and as a former municipal councillor, one of the biggest conversations that we have at UBCM, at the FCM, the Union of BC Municipalities, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, is the infrastructure deficit. Unfortunately, what's happened on the Gulf Islands, specifically on Salt Spring and on the other Gulf Islands, is that the provincial government has been derelict in their duty to make the investments that are needed and the maintenance that have been needed in order to continue to upgrade that infrastructure. Look, we all know that there's a very, very important question that is going to be posed to Salt Spring Island about the future of governance. And I think that there's been a lot of divide and conquer techniques that have been used by the BC Liberals with this question. And the reality of it is that there is an awful lot of money that is going to need to be spent to make the upgrades that you're talking about, and that the governance question actually doesn't really necessarily solve that very well.
How can we solve Salt Springs problems in 1 minute? Not an easy question to answer, but on the specific subject of roads. Roads on Salt Spring are actually a partnership agreement between the Islands Trust and the Ministry of Transport. The Islands Trust instructs the Ministry what kind of roads they want to preserve. We've got a bucolic lifestyle here. People like our narrower, winding roads as part of the character of the island. The island's trust instructs the Ministry of Transport to make sure that we maintain that. Now, are there areas where we could use some sidewalks or some road widening? Certainly. We've got a wonderful organization on the island called Island Pathways, which is seeking to do that with gravel pathways in the inner area around Ganges and reaching ever further out. These are great solutions to an island that wants to preserve a unique character. We need to, of course, make sure the roads are safe, but we also have to understand what we ourselves have asked for in terms of retaining the character of this lovely island.
Thank you, Steve. Gary.
Yeah, difficult question. First of all, the MLA does have an important an important role in terms of maintaining our roads. Actually, MOT has a pretty good relationship with the MLA office. This is probably one of the most frequent calls we get in our MLA office is about the status of our roads. Clearly, the Liberal government is starving maintenance in rural areas, and provincial governments are not indifferent around incorporation decisions either, because what they would prefer you to do is take on 300 kilometers of roads that in some cases have been poorly built. They certainly have been poorly maintained, and you'll have a decision on September 9th, apparently, about whether you want to take on that system. The island pathways, the pathways that are being built around Ganges, that's happening because as CERDI director, I created the Salt Spring Island Transportation Commission, and they are partnering with Island Pathways. They've built $1 million worth of pathways for about $200,000. It's the only transportation commission in a rural area in British Columbia, and it's something that needs to be replicated in other rural areas.
So I think we have time for, unfortunately, just one more question. And as the students started us off, I'd like to give the opportunity to a student to ask the final question.
Hi, this is a question for all candidates on behalf of the GISS student body. I'm wondering, what do you think of the benefits of publicly versus privately owned companies that the public relies on for essential services such as ferries, hospitals, and telephone services? Yeah, the difference between public and privately owned services. Thank you.
Stephen, lead us on this one, please.
So the difference between public and private sector companies, what's the benefit and the negatives? There are certain things, of course, that it seems like the public sector is best at delivering on. When it comes to healthcare, taking the profit motivation out of healthcare is critically important. Only governments can really do that. I've lived in a number of communities around the world with different types of healthcare systems, and I can tell you that when it's a private sector motivation and cash is motivating the doctor and the clinic, you sometimes get different treatment than you might expect in a publicly funded system. Having said that, when it's publicly funded, you've got a taxpayer as your taskmaster, and taxpayers are somewhat resistant to increased spending. We can never spend enough taxpayers' money on healthcare, for example. So we've got to watch that, make sure we deliver the best possible services while guarding the taxpayer's wallet as well. And in other sectors, ICBC, that's proven to be quite beneficial for British Columbians. In places where there are private sector insurers, it's been more expensive. But the private sector has a place to play too, because they're often quite efficient.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, Tommy Douglas, as you know, invented public health care in Canada, so you might expect that we will be defending that system as best we can. Absolutely, the private profit motive has no place at all in healthcare, and be careful what you wish for, too, with this Liberal government. There is a proposal now that they are considering for private surgeries, allowing overnight stays of up to 3 nights. This will create many private hospitals in British Columbia. You can bet that's going to happen. Public education, look at the mess. We've just discussed the mess that this government has been starving public education, forcing people into the private system. By the way, BC NDP government will not change the financing rules for private schools. What we will be doing is providing more resources for public education. BC Ferries, the Liberals have essentially tried to create a private corporation out of BC Ferries, and they've completely gone away from the notion of BC Ferries as part of our public transportation system. The NDP is going to change that.
Look, there are services by government. There's just no question about it. Education, every single British Columbian has a right to a good quality education, and that is done when the government provides that education. Healthcare, we need to provide every British Columbian access to healthcare, and the public system does that the best. BC Ferries, the BC Greens have promised to bring BC Ferries back in as a crown because we've seen the experiment of the BC Liberals and their desire to privatize BC Ferries to be the failure that it is. And you're paying much, much more now than is necessary. This is part of the transportation and the transit network, and we need to bring it back into a crown and do a full study on what the impact of the BC Liberals experiment has been, and then work out how we can make sure that ferries are affordable for Islanders.
Thank you all, and thank you for the questions. I would like to now invite the candidates to take 2 minutes to provide us with their closing remarks. As at the start, we pulled cards to see who was going to lead off, and at this stage it will be Gary, please.
Well, thanks so much to the high school, to the Salisbury Forum for holding this event. Gee, there's so much more. I'm sure all of us wanted to talk a little bit more about our policies, our plans for British Columbia. I think there's two roles that you expect an MLA to play. You expect an MLA to stand up for the community, to represent community interest, to advocate for the community. I think I've walked the talk in that respect. Grace Island, I mentioned recycling. For the past 4 years, it's been such an honor to work as your MLA, and I want to continue doing that job regardless of who forms government. But you have another proposition to consider here. There is another way in British Columbia, and that's to elect a BC NDP government. If you want to change the voting system in British Columbia to make it a fairer system, if you want to ban big money from politics, if you want to create tens of thousands of units of affordable housing, we didn't get a chance to talk about that. If you want an aggressive climate action plan, if you want to stop sightseeing in Kinder Morgan, there's only one way that is going to happen is if we change government in this province. We can do so much better. And I would be honored to continue to serve you as your MLA, regardless of which government forms power. But we can do so much better in British Columbia. We can strike a much better balance here to take care of average folks rather than pandering to the wealthy and the large corporations that this Liberal government is tied to the hip at. So thanks so much, everyone, for coming out today. I hope I can get your support in the upcoming election. I'd be honored to continue to serve as your MLA, and I was remiss in not congratulating the improv team for your national win in Ottawa. Congratulations.
The BC Liberal government has created an economic record that's the envy of the rest of the country. At the same time, we've been recognized for a revenue-neutral carbon tax that is leading the continent. We've also been recognized by the Queen for the Great Bear Rainforest, which sets aside a preserve of land the size of the nation of Ireland for future generations. At the same time, we have programs like those that set up electric vehicle charging stations. We're investing $4.2 billion over the next 3 years into healthcare. We've got another $2.7 billion in capital projects for healthcare. On Salt Spring Island, we have some needs. We have needs for long-term residential care. We have needs in our hospital. $2.7 billion would go a long way, and it's more than we actually need for this island, but some of that should come our way. We need a strong advocate in this community, someone who's worked in this community, who's worked in healthcare and in land use in this community, someone who understands the needs of Salt Spring Island and the people here, who wants to make a difference. Someone who wants to make sure that our children have jobs to go to, whether it's on the island or on the bigger island, Vancouver Island. Those are critically important things. It's about raising families here. It's about looking after the people we love. Without a robust economy, we're not going to be able to provide or do any of those things. Under the NDP, not a single hospital was built in 10 years, not one. Over the last 6 years, we built 5 new hospitals, built a dozen new wings, and renovated many more. You need to have a robust economy, and we've seen it turning around on Salt Spring as well over the last couple of years. if you're going to be able to afford all of those services that we so richly deserve and so richly desire. I'm looking to be your effective MLA in a strong BC Liberal government, making sure this island gets recognized and noticed.
Thank you all for coming out this afternoon. I have to address this message that I've heard over and over and over again from the Democratic Reform critic, that there is only one way to change government. There's a bit of irony in that, the Democratic Reform critic telling you that there's only one way to change government. The fact of the matter is that Andrew Weaver and Elizabeth May have proven that we can change the tone of government simply by doing the job of the office, by sitting in the office and by representing the place and standing up with a voice. The fact of the matter is that we've increased the quality of democracy since we've been elected. We have put pressure on our BC NDP colleagues in the legislature. We've given voice to their environmental wing. Don't forget that we have got, and I don't like going back into history too much, but don't forget Axe the Tax. Don't forget Clackawas Sound. The BC Greens are the only party in this election that have said that we'd stop sightseeing. We're the only party in this election that has said that we are going to ban and stop clear-cut logging. So, if you want the things that Mr. Holman has said, I would say that you need an insurance policy, and the BC Greens have proven to be that insurance policy in the legislature. The BC Liberals want the status quo. They've proven they are out of touch with British Columbians. The BC NDP won better, but as Andrew said last night, better than the worst is still pretty bad. The BC Green Plan is bold. We've offered a courageous vision of leadership for British Columbia in the 21st century. And don't forget, this is your vote. Nobody owns this vote but you. And I'm seeking your trust and asking that you place your vote in my care for the next 4 years. Heichka, thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Gary and Adam and Stephen for coming out. You always know you're going to have a stimulating, active conversation on Salt Spring. And honestly, it's just so impressive to see so many people come out to an event like this. And thank you also to the candidates for staying afterwards to allow for more one-on-one questions. They'll be at the party tables over on this side. I'd now like to introduce Juliet Niquette, who is the Salt Spring Forum Manager. He just has a few things to say. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Elisa. And thank you to everyone for coming today. I just have a few announcements and thank yous. So thank you to the GISS staff, all the students who helped set up all the chairs. Thank you. Salt Spring Stage, the Driftwood, thank you. Forum, Dave and Dan, thank you. And Fraser as well. I just wanted to say, if you could stack, if you have time, just to stack the chairs in fives, that would be amazing to help. And anyone that is parked in the turnaround where the buses pull in off of Rainbow Road should move by 4:15 at the latest, because you don't want to get towed. So, like Elisa said, you can stay afterwards and chat for a little bit with the candidates if you didn't get your questions answered. There'll be students at the door with a donation basket. If you have something to offer, that would be great, just to help the forum cover our costs, like the sound and all that for today. We're also selling memberships, and our next event is on next Friday. There'll be flyers on your chairs. And it's for Dr. Daniel Pauly, a world-renowned fisheries scientist. So he's going to be talking about fish, the oceans, what challenges we're currently facing, what we can do to help. So thank you very much for coming, and yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.